Hi there, I'm Rebecca and a really warm welcome back to my channel Created by Rebecca. On this week's video we're going to do a little crossover with my other channel Pumpkin Becki. And yes, it's Halloween inspired. Let's get started. 2 years ago I made a fairy garden for Pumpkin Becki and I made all the miniatures that went in it. There was a crypt, there were gravestones, there were ravens. And I thought I'd really like to use that again. It's been outside in the elements for 2 years and it's doing really well, but I'd kind of like it to be an indoor decoration now. I'd found this huge lantern on a white elephant stall at a village event. It was bright red, it was missing some of its glass, and I thought there's something I can do with this. Maybe I can do a planter for succulents or something. So I brought it home. I decided quite quickly that I wanted to paint it in a copper colour and then do a verdigris paint effect on it. I'm trained in decorative paint effects, so I had the idea of what I wanted to do with the lantern on the outside, but not necessarily what I wanted to put in it. It was really big and not terribly practical as a lantern. And then when the idea came to rescue the miniatures for something inside, I put the two together in my mind and I came up with a Halloween project for Created by Rebecca. If you'd like to see the video where I make the miniatures for the fairy garden, click that little card up there and it will take you to that video over on Pumpkin Becki. You'll see me making everything and then putting it into the garden, and then there's some really cool little videos at the end that we did with some special effects. I love it. There are also some clips of that I've tagged on the end here along with the final reveal of the project. Here's an example of verdigris. Now I'm going to be trying to replicate that with paint rather than actually making metal go that colour. I'm going to use just 4 colours of paint. 2 blues, a green and a white. They're all acrylic based. The copper paint that I have used is actually a hammerite and it's not quite as coppery as I would have liked it to be, but it's fine. It's almost more like a bronzy colour really. So I'm applying it with a paintbrush quite loosely, and then I am coming back in with a kitchen towel and just dabbing over it to remove any brush strokes and distribute the colour fairly evenly, but patchiness is fine. And I can sort of change up the colour by adding a little bit more blue on one area. Here I've added some white to make a much lighter version of the colour, and building it up in layers, letting them dry in between, gives you a really good effect. I've cut a paper template to fit the bottom of the lantern, and I'm going to use that to cut out this blue foam. It is sort of like an insulation type foam, like an XPS, the type that model makers use. And I'm just taking lots of cuts with a simple craft knife to cut this through. I'll do a test fit and I can see it is actually a little bit oversized there, so take it back out again. And use the craft knife and my fingers to rough up the top edge of that piece of foam, make it look a bit more natural, but also reduce the size, particularly on the corners. I think that's where it was sort of snagging up a little bit. I'm using a craft knife just to mark the position of where the crypt will sit. I'm going to use that shape to divide this piece of foam into two sections. Because my original model was designed to sit within soil, it has quite a bit that actually goes into what would have been the ground. I don't have that now, so I need to sort of replicate it with the foam. So just doing a test fit. The front fits brilliantly because obviously I used that to cut with. So I can use a cocktail stick just to pin the 3 layers of foam together. Push that down so it's hidden. And then I can work out why the back section isn't quite fitting. Once I've got that, I can use more skewers. These are bamboo barbecue skewers. And I'm just cutting those at surface level. And then pushing them, so again they're sort of sub-flush really. And this just saves me trying to find a way to glue those pieces of foam together. And then I use leftover pieces to build up around the crypt, again to sort of bring it back up to where that original soil level was. I did a bit of research on how to make my own flocking, which is what they use to make grass effects on sort of model railways and dioramas, that sort of thing. Most of it involves paper pulp and a lot of time, and I thought, well, I could either buy it or I need another method that's quicker. And I saw a tutorial for making it out of twine and then dyeing it. You just bundle up a piece of twine, take some scissors and chop it up really finely. This is where it starts to go wrong. I mixed together a dab of all 4 colours of the paint and got it to the colour I liked, and then started to introduce the chopped up twine fibre and realised really quickly that actually all I had managed to do was create little balls of paint which were surrounded in this casing of the fibre, and I just couldn't get the colour to move around anymore. And then I added some more water. You can see it's just dirty rinsing water from my jam jar, and I'm just adding that, and I ended up having to add quite a lot of water, which meant that it then took an awful long time to dry, and even when it was dry it had dried in clumps, so I then had to go back through it all and cut it again. by which time I was thinking, I wish I'd just bought a pack. I'm putting some of the Mod Podge into a plastic tray and adding some black acrylic paint to it, mixing it through, and then I realise I need a little bit more black. It's going to dry a little bit too translucent. This is going to cover the blue foam, so I do actually want quite a good solid colour. You can see I've textured the foam quite a bit, and I actually did that with things like the ends of paintbrushes and just sort of poking it and pulling it. You can sort of tear off bits with your fingertips just to make it quite craggly and naturalish, and try and sort of disguise where the different layers were. And I'm painting that Mod Podge all over the top. Now the Mod Podge isn't just like PVA glue, it has got some resin type element in it, so it will give it a little bit of extra protection. So I coat that all over the foam base, and unfortunately you can see I also managed to splash it up the side of the steps, but I have a plan for that. I'm not too worried. Now that's completely dry, I've taken some of the paler blue and the pale green, mixed it together, and I'm just roughly brushing it over the top of the foam base. It's not like dry brushing where you would only just want to lightly catch the texture that you've created. This is more coverage than that, but it's not a full coat of paint. And every now and again I might add in a bit of extra green and just add that in places, but not consistently. And we're going to let that dry. It did take a little bit of finagling to get that into the lantern, but because there was no glass in the panels, it made life a lot easier than it would have been. Now I'm painting some neat Mod Podge onto the foam base and sprinkling on some of my nicely dried and chopped up flocking material. And I'm going to do that all over the base. I suspect there will still be little bits that don't have flocking on them. I'm not worried about that. That's all dried now, and I could have gone and sprayed a coat of watered down PVA glue over the top just to seal in the loose fibres. Instead I chose to actually brush any loose away with a big paintbrush. Now I've got some of this coarse quartz sand, which I think I got with an air plant, and I'm just going to sprinkle it over damp patches of Mod Podge. You can see I've come across some pockets of loose flocking here, so I'm just actually almost painting it to the surface with the Mod Podge, and that will hold it together. Here's a line where I didn't manage to disguise the break between the layers of foam terribly well, so I am really putting on quite a bit of Mod Podge here, almost using it to fill the gap. And then I've got a pinch of the flocking and I am pressing that, rather than sprinkling it, onto the Mod Podge. And that has made that gap disappear. Here's my tree. I know it's going to be too big and I am going to have to bend one or two of the branches, which is going to crack the polymer clay, but I want it in here. It's part of the scene. I had to be quite brutal with it, but eventually I do get it seated. But I think actually it's sitting a little bit too close to the precipice, and rather than trying to make gnarly roots to make it hold on, which I could have done, I decided to press the foam down to make the area it could sit on a little bit bigger and further in. That way the tree is going to then sit up into the dome of the lantern, and it'll be a little bit closer to the steps of the crypt. I'm using my pliers to push down into the foam and create slots that will fit my gravestones, and they'll get randomly placed around. I also made some boulders which had skulls on them, and just placing those around. This is a cluster of pebbles and boulders that I made, but actually it's too big of a thing to use here, so I can just break it apart. And in fact I'm going to break it down further than that to give me some really usable pieces in this scale of setting. Anything that sort of small would have just got buried in the outdoor fairy garden, but here they're perfect. This is PVA glue that I've got in the little bottle, and I'm trying to find a way to apply silver birch seeds onto the surface of the PVA glue. I did discover that the best way was to apply the glue, and then with just a tiny dab of the glue on the end of the cocktail stick, I could dip it into my little pile of seeds, which look very much like maple leaves or sycamore leaves, and then I could transfer them to the little scene, and once they were in the bigger glue pile, the little bit that I had on the end of my cocktail stick would release the leaf onto the pile. So these just look like autumn leaves that have blown into the nooks and crannies of this graveyard. did buy some of this Jarvis Countryside Scenics Autumn Mix Lichen. I really wanted it for this kind of dark brown, blackish colour. I've also got some lichen that I found when I was on my walk for acorn caps, and that's a really beautiful, almost verdigris colour, so I'll use some of that as well. The model making stuff is softer, they must treat it with something to keep it soft and pliable, whereas my lichen has well and truly dried out over the last couple of weeks. I'm taking some slightly longer bits of the twine, breaking them down into threads, and then setting those in patches of PVA glue to look like bits of long grass. And I'm just adding these little details all over the place. This is around the back, and I'm just trying to soften that line where the crypt wall meets the ground layer. And then just when I think I've added enough detail, I add more. And then I actually add some to my miniatures as well. I'm adding some bits of the jute twine, some bits of the lichen, just so it looks like weeds have grown up through the cobbles and that sort of thing. And then these slightly bigger, more open bits of lichen to look like little shrubs. In my lichen pack there was actually a few strands of sphagnum moss, so I'm gluing that to, or trying to, glue it to the wall of the crypt. I'm going to be adding some LED lights to the crypt, so I need to find a way of disguising it, and by using some twiny vines it might be quite a useful way of doing that. So here it is in its final form. I am so pleased with every bit of this. I'm so happy with the way the verdigris turned out, the fact that I've been able to rescue the miniatures from the elements and use them in something indoors. I really thoroughly loved doing the sort of scenic landscaping that it could sit on. Yes, I had a little bit of an issue getting the tree in, but this tree wasn't made for this lantern, so you know, you have to break an egg to make an omelette, don't you? I love that it's all the way around 360, and I love that it is lit as well. I'm glad I didn't reuse the purple lights on this project. They've been outside for 2 years, and actually the green ones give this a different look. Good decision. Right, that's it for this week's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, share and subscribe to me here on YouTube. And until next time, bye.